You guys ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to ENDGAME, the talk show about the end of the world. And your host tonight, Mr. Pinkie, Itvarana, and Nomono. Let's make some noise, guys. Come on.
I mean, yay.
We'll add more cheers in post. Hey guys, welcome to ENDGAME. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Nomono?
I'm doing fine. Like the world's still here. Like we're moving along. This week we're going to talk about the new identity crisis. This idea that our personas are changing, our identities are changing, and what that means. But before we get to that, we're going to do our community spotlight. And this week we welcome Gao.
Get up here,
right here.
Yeah.
Get over here. So, Gao, how are you feeling about the future, like in general? Like, if you had to say, if we're gonna, the next 100 years, like, how are you feeling about it?
I'd say that is honestly depending on what our current leaders are doing. Because right now it's kind of an uncertain time, because anything could change the future as we know it. It's one that certainly will be shaped based on current leaders' actions.
I wonder if we can assume we make it through whatever this transitionary period is, and we cross the threshold, and we're all still here in 10 years, and all the countries are generally still here. Like, what do you see happening then? Like, if we get over this current political problem, like, where do we go from there?
I think we probably will start seeing people address the more current issues that we're facing: climate change, the lack of water and food in some areas.
What do you guys think we're going to make it? Like, if he's talking about, like, okay, if we get through this current crisis, then we'll start worrying about climate change.
I feel like we're fine. Generally speaking,
We're going to be.
What? It's just gonna work out. I feel like any amount. Oh yeah,
This is good. I've never heard you before.
So you think we're going to be fine? Like, you think this is all solvable? Like, if we get through the next couple of years?
It's hard for me to say if any particular situation can be solvable. I feel like it's more of just a balance of situations. We can't just have a continuous stream of bad situations. I feel like the universe just doesn't really work like that. Things will kind of find a way to balance itself out. Maybe we won't drive it that way, but if it's not going to get there in our hands, something will balance it out. And I don't know if it's going to be extinction, because an extinction event is a popular idea and it's a possible idea. But we're very close to the space age. So I feel like people really underestimate our ability to get out into different planets and stuff like that. Like, it was the Cold War propaganda that got us to the moon. Like, we didn't have the funding to get to the moon, but as soon as the Russians were trying to get there, we immediately got there in like a couple of years. Like, we built the ships we need, we funded the things we needed to. Like, we have the plans and the will to go to places and solve a lot of our issues. It's just like we don't have a situation that would necessarily warrant us to go out to a different planet to survive yet. We're still very comfortable here on Earth.
That makes sense to me. You're sort of talking about how, like, when the pressure is on, then we'll, like, solve stuff. And, like, when you're talking about sort of balance, the way that things might, like, come around or equal out, like, that makes sense to me if we're living in a simulation. So, like, that's my hope. If we're not in a simulation and this is real, I see no reason why things can't go bonkers.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a simulation. I mean, like, the general workings of the universe generally are to balance itself out. Like a system that is kind of closed in and of itself generally seeks an equilibrium. It seeks some kind of balance. It's only when other systems are introduced that things can kind of get out of whack. And so I feel like that's like the only real way that we could actually ever be faced with a real extinction event is if like something like a meteor crashed or the Earth just froze over, like something that was completely out of our control. I don't think we'll die by our own hands. I don't feel like that. Society's got a funny way of balancing itself out because we're closest to us. People are closest to us. I probably would bet on that, actually.
I'm pretty optimistic about where we're going right now. It's a good time to be alive. In the past, when it's been equally crappy or even worse politically, it was not a good time to be alive. But now, I mean, life is improving globally. In some places it could improve faster, but it's still improving globally. I think we're doing pretty good overall.
That's what I hear, like, that we're exaggerating a lot of stuff. Like, there's a lot of scary shit happening, but there's a lot of, like, things are getting better in a bunch of areas. And it's just what we decide to focus on.
And if you fall into the fear-mongering on Facebook and clickbaity type things, then sure, go for it. You can feel all like the world is going to end, it's all doom and gloom, but you're kind of wasting life if you're going to be all sad and doom and gloom all the time. It's hard to enjoy things when you're intentionally trying not to enjoy them.
Are you listening, Collapse subreddit? These people. Gal, do you have any specific predictions for like the next 100 years? Something you're looking forward to happening, or something crazy you imagine?
Oh yes, definitely. There is definitely one. Us colonizing Mars, or at least landing on Mars.
If you had the opportunity to be one of those first people that goes to Mars and never comes back, and you probably don't live that long and you die there, would you do it?
I probably wouldn't
Be the pioneer?
necessarily,
Probably at
unless
this
there was an
point.
emergency. Like there was this documentary, like what if a nebula started going towards Earth? If it was an emergency to get off of Earth, I would, but otherwise I would stay here because Mars, to be frank, is not as pretty as say Earth, because there are still things in this Earth that are still pretty.
It's funny how many of us want to get off planet, and like when you think about getting to Mars, and like it's a barren wasteland and it's uninhabitable. Like Earth is better. Like as much as we're down on
It
Earth.
has Earth-like conditions. Scientists, there used to be water on the planet, and there could have been microbes on the planet, but because Mars did not get us the favorable treatment as we did. I mean, think about it. The thing that probably saved us is getting hit by that giant planet when Earth was first forming. But Mars did not get that kind of treatment. The water just froze to the top and bottom of the poles, and just the rest evaporated or sank deep enough to where it couldn't evaporate.
If we think we're able to make this barren wasteland habitable, why can't we just pull these resources together and just restore this planet? I mean, we have the stuff here, and up there it's just a barren ball of dust.
There's too many people on this planet who disagree with your opinions. That's the problem. Like
nuclear.
you have some
There's also
ideas.
just
Yeah.
too many people disagree.
The urge to get off the planet seems to come from to get towards opportunity, to solve any kind of population issue before it happens, because we're not really in a serious population issue. We're only in a serious personal space issue where we're going to have to start limiting our personal space to make room for more people. There might just be like an issue of people getting sick and tired of the cultures that they have to choose from. Like, oh, yeah, we have plenty of space, but I only have these countries that I don't really particularly like to choose from to live in.
I don't like any of these countries. I want a new place. I need a new planet.
You know, like back when people were exploring the seas, back in the 1700s, like people created their own little colonies away from any kingdoms or things. That's what America was founded on. That was what a lot of pirate bays were founded on, just like a place to call your own that doesn't have any connection to some kind of higher society. A lot of people seek that. That's what most people consider to be freedom, to kind of be in a little society of your own that's not really too big. Like I don't want to be a part of some big society structure, because like even if we don't suffer from overpopulation, we might suffer from like over-integration, where people are so integrated into these societies that it feels stuffy. And maybe that's what some of the thrill of getting out to a different planet, getting into a different
And that's why we've escaped the VRchat.
The humans have a deep sense of exploration as well. There are a lot of people that want to go just to go. Just because it's something completely different than what they've seen and experienced their entire lives in the location they're at now. Like, that place is new and exotic and different. Let's go there.
I feel like we're going to solve a lot of this with the metaverse and VR. We're going to find our own Mars, and where I can
I think we need both.
feel...
Both is
Because
expanding
VR is a lot
internally.
easier. Anything else you want to mention, Gal, before we move on to the main subject?
I don't really have any other comments. Let's get to the main subject.
So now what we're going to talk about is the new identity crisis. What do I mean by that? Let me pull up my notes. Okay, so what is our identity? Like, what is a persona? So, like, how should we, for this discussion, like, how can we define that so we're all on the same page?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing you kind of have to establish is what is a persona? What is a personality? Because to understand what we're doing here by trying to obtain a new one, we kind of have to understand how we might, like what the nature of that is, like what the nature of a personality is. The word persona comes from Latin persona, which means from where the sound comes out. And it refers to the masks that the Greeks used to play in theater. Persona was the act, the mask, the character that you put on that wasn't really who you were. Like what we call the personality was originally referred to as an act. And it doesn't exactly mean that in our culture now. Like an actor is someone who's being fake, like what they're putting on isn't real. There's something underneath. But we consider like our personality, our persona, to be that thing underneath. Most of us do.
It's not superficial. Like even though we're putting on a mask, like there's a lot of ourselves in that, and it does represent us in some way.
It's more so the mask that the society gives to you. It shows the role that you play in society, the role in your family, the role in your job, all that stuff. It is not as much of a play or as an act, but it is the role that you play in the physical reality, choosing a format of how you're going to interact with your environment.
There's a lot of different terms of what we call like persona. It really depends on what you are. Like, for example, in the furry community, what we call a persona would be called a fursona.
Yeah, we've got a lot of more modern terms. We've definitely taken the idea, we're in a culture now that is very, very obsessed with identity and personas, which is why we're talking about it, because we've taken a very new aspect of it. Because most people back in the day, when I'm talking about back in the day, I mean, like when the word was invented, didn't really consider finding themselves to be a thing. There wasn't like a very big sense of individuality as opposed to now. We know people were very focused on their role to play in society. That was the biggest aspect of their lives. And now that we don't really kind of identify with that much, we identify with something more personal. We identify with something even closer to our center. That doesn't necessarily have to do with what we do as a job or where we were born or who our family is. We're evolving this concept of identity. We're finding new roles to play. We're finding new things to be, and we're taking a bigger, more personal hand in it. We're not just letting it happen. We're not letting the society shape us. We want to shape it. We want to be more involved in it. How one goes about even putting on a personality to begin with, like how does that even happen to begin with?
How do you figure out your identity?
Yeah, because still generally in society, that's generally how it happens, right? You generally are born into a family and you're taught things, you're educated, you are taught a language, and a lot of your internal monologue, the voice in your head that you consider to be you, is still a social construct. It is still a language inside of your head that was given to you. The concepts and ideas and the definitions were given to you. And so you have to, if you really get serious about like identity finding, sometimes you have to challenge that. You have to challenge a lot of like the things that you were given by the society. Through the 1900s, like the kids just kind of be like, that's, like the kids who always find themselves were like the rebellious, the ones that didn't want to be a part of society, breaking away from that, because that's what it's kind of all about, breaking away from what society has given you and to find out what you can really be beyond a society. And then we're trying to make a society out of it.
What you're saying is that historically, if you were born by a farm family, you were a farmer, and you did the things that a farmer would do that was predefined as the farmer persona, and you filled that role as best as possible to be a good functioning member of that society.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no reason for that blacksmith to experiment, right? Like they don't have room to like go play around and like why would they need to do that? They're a blacksmith. Like it's been destined.
It is very integrated into the family, into the name. Like this is the name, the last name Smith that's so common is their Smith. Like your last name was generally your profession, Baker, Smith. My personal name in Irish means crown maker, because I come from a family of people who made jewelry for the royalty in some country that I've probably never heard of.
Oh. But what's Pinkie mean? What did you guys do?
I couldn't tell you for many reasons. Some of them legal.
Also illegal.
Hey, actually, the thing about persona, the thing I notice is depends on the age. As a teen, you're trying to find your place, whether you want, do I want to be popular? What do I have to do to be popular? So on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. As you age, you kind of get more comfortable in your skin, if that makes any sense. Then you get to the point where I'm retired and all that. And it's basically, I am who I am. If you don't like me, hey, that's your problem, not mine. And like when you're young, you're trying to find what is my spot, where is my place in society? What do I want to be? Do I want to be the asshole? Do I want to be the nice guy? What do I want to be?
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of about age. As children are just like information sponges, and not just information sponges, but they are also mimicking people. Monkey see, monkey do. Like they're just mimicking you. You when you teach a baby things, you not only, because they don't understand your language, you kind of have to like move with them to show them what the word signifies, and that's how they learn. They're not just learning the word; they're learning what the word means. They're learning what that means to a person already, and so are adopting kind of like a split personality of what their parents generally kind of give them. And then you send them to preschool, and the teachers kind of get that, and they are put into a group of people. And kids, as they grow older, just slowly stop soaking up as much information, and then they stop changing, or like, because when they're born, they don't really have something that we would really call personality. They have kind of like traits, like maybe what we call personality traits. But then like
from there, resolution.
Yeah, it's very basic. It's it's like a template. It's an open canvas.
Some of it is hereditary too, because if you got two parents that are short fused, chances are the kid's going to be short fused.
Yeah, genetics is a huge part of that as well. But as we all know, like what you're given isn't all that you've got. That's kind of how evolution works. You kind of get what was last there, but you are given an environment to change that and create something new out of that, and that's how we progress. And so
we stand on the shoulders of like the previous generation and move a little bit farther.
Yeah. And your body evolves much slower, but a society of people can evolve much faster. Your personality can change during your lifetime. Some people, even of age, are still able to go through these big processes if they really have the desire to, or if they're in a position where they need to, those laws still kind of apply. And it's harder to do. It's more difficult to do when you're so integrated into a personality, to do when you're older. But yeah, it is about age.
Mr. Pinkie, do you want to talk about because you have a kid? I wonder if you're noticing anything like him being flexible and taking things on at this point.
I watch him, and I do a lot of observational stuff with him because it's interesting to me to watch kind of his brain put things together and then comprehend concepts. I try to kind of steer maybe his development of his personality towards to being more critical thinking, kind of steer him away from being quick to anger. That's been an issue I've been dealing with for a little bit now. But things like that, like I'm attempting to do those things, but watching how he handles things, he does have multiple personas. And I know this because his teachers say one thing and I see something differently and his mother sees something else differently. It's weird that he doesn't act the same around her as he does around me. It's really deep, especially after some of the conversations we've had, that it's like, I've got to rethink how I'm going about this whole situation with him because, I have to outsmart a 5-year-old.
I mean, I'm personally too young to have a kid, but that's something that I feel like I would like to have the opportunity to watch how a child grows firsthand and to be a part of that, because that's one of the things that drives a lot of us is like what it would be like to raise our own kid and raise another potentially little mini you that will eventually not be you. But yeah, we generally call the persona the ego or whatever you want to call it, isn't really just a mask that we wear, anymore. We've got multiple layers to this. We have different layers of what we feel is like really us. Like the Japanese interpretation of the 3 faces that each person has, where like one is the face that you present publicly in the real world when you're trying to get along in your regular social environment. One is the face that you present to your friends and family, which is much more relaxed and not as serious, much more upbeat. And then there's like the internal face that they believe no one sees. And it comes from a book called The Shogun. But I feel like it could be a way to help visualize this a little better, because in psychology, when you refer to the levels of the human ego or whatever, there are multiple layers from it. You have your subconscious, which is like just a lot of noise that doesn't really add up to any kind of personality whatsoever. It's kind of like the foundation of where that internal monologue comes from, where you get a lot of these thoughts and sensible ideas. Like people consider the subconscious to be where a lot of the real you lies, and that's why a lot of people are really into dream interpretation, because the dreams kind of really dig into the subconscious. And people pull a lot of crazy things out of there, because that's a really good way to see into the subconscious and what's really going on in there. And then we can kind of layer that and say,
journals, by the way, we assigned that like a month ago. Keep your dream journals. We might come back to that one day.
Crap.
But yeah, we have these different layers. Generally, as it's been, most people have had this kind of called 3-phase routine, like where you do have like this presentable thing, and you have this more leisurely, relaxed thing that you use with your friends and family, and then you have the internal one, which is really where a lot of your personal desires come from, things that you wouldn't even tell your family.
Can we actually update that? Like, because you're talking about the way you act with your family, the way you act at work, like the way that you might be inside, and like we're talking about your son sort of taking on different, depending on if he's dealing with school or his mom or whatever. Like, I assume we have a new one that's strictly like internet based, or like our
that's where we're going with this. The personality that people bring out into the internet is resemblant more so of the internet is more so like an environment. Like the environment is more relatable to real life, where you're with the people that you don't know, and you're in situations that you're unfamiliar with. A situation that would normally warrant a more serious and more professional kind of attitude, for lack of a better word. But we don't present that. We don't try to present any kind of serious attitude. The internet is just full of a bunch of strangers communicating as if they're best friends through all types of things, memes, videos, trends, or whatever, like through these things, people kind of adopt a personality that is somehow more relaxed, more personal face that they present in an environment where it is more open and free, and you are in a situation where you could just meet about anybody and be in any situation. VR in particular is interesting because what it does to the psychology potentially, we're in an environment where it all feels real too. And that's kind of the big thing that we're trying to talk about, is how VR could affect this, because the internet has already brought out a lot of interesting social changes, and this is all while looking at like a 2D screen most of the time. And now we're in an environment where our psychology generally thinks that this is, to some extent, visually real, like you can get a lot of illusions to where you feel like you're here, and people already experience a lot of interesting phenomena off of that, like experiencing touch when they're not actually being touched. And what that could do to the personality and how we develop that, I don't know.
Let's do a quick poll with your emojis. Like, I'm curious if you think, so thumbs up if VR specifically has made you question your identity, or I guess your persona in some way, or a thumbs down if you feel the same way since you got VR. Well, I saw a sad face. That's not the same as a thumbs down. Okay, it looks about even. I'm seeing a lot of both. Maybe more thumbs down, or maybe those people are just louder.
Sorry.
Love.
Has VR changed the way that you identify? Like, have you questioned your identity since being here? Like, you look at your hands and you're like, oh my God, who am I?
On the topic of different faces and stuff, I realized like I have one for family and kind of one for friends, and then there's this weird variant of the friends one that seems to almost exclusively kind of go online. I don't know what it is, but like I'll joke with my friends stuff. For some reason online, I just always defaults back to the single kind of personality or character.
Is the online one the one that you use here, do you think?
Yeah, like the way I behave here, this is kind of just my, like if I play any online game, I kind of default eventually to this goofy behavior, and then I'll have a different thing with friends, and with family, I'm more straight-laced, a little more laid back, but even if I'm in different groups and different games, it all just defaults back to this.
I keep wanting to ask, and I guess I shouldn't ask this question, but like, which is the real one? I guess there's no answer to that. Like, I'm curious, which is more genuine? Like, are you being yourself when you're in this version of friend mode as opposed to friend mode in real life?
Kind of more genuine here, almost, it feels like. Though, if I'm tired around my friends, the more tired I get, the more filters are stripped off. It really depends on the group of friends, how many in the environment, but I feel like this is closer to me. Not Shem or any of this crap, but just the way I behave online and interact with others. It always feels more closer to me than I would say, like, especially like, because I work in a machine shop, so I just, I keep it to myself. I'm kind of the quiet guy at work. I won't really talk to people unless they talk to me. I'll sometimes hold a conversation, but for the most part, I keep it to myself. But here, hell, I'll just chat your ear off if you give me a chance.
Visually, too, I'll bet you this lines up in some way. Like, I'm sure there's some metaphor we can find about your body here that lines up with your personality. It's not random.
I wanted to make an avatar custom with a tool I knew how to use, and I knew how to use CAD software to make
Shut up! It's not random. You made a choice subconsciously.
I definitely think anything that relates to like a choice that we make, like when you choose to make an avatar, even if you think that you're just kind of throwing it together, you kind of are throwing the chips to your subconscious, which is already just a lot of noise. Yeah. The three-face thing is really kind of a loose thing to what's really going on. Like, what's really going on is you've got a subconscious, and then you've got a lot of conscious possibilities, and it starts from when people are really young and kids are playing games. Like, you mentioned cops,
cowboys and Indians,
cowboys and Indians. Like, they're already like the nature of human beings almost seems to be, what role can I play? Like, that almost seems like the game that we're playing. We're not out there to search for who we really are necessarily, as much as we are trying to see what we can make as a result of getting into all of these other roles. Like, we want to go out and experience new roles to play up until a certain point, and then maybe age does kick in, and then you're just like, what, I'm done playing these games. I'm just going to settle with what I have.
It's very practical, that playfulness, because like experiencing all that stuff. Otherwise, how would you have like any kind of idea what fits into who you are if you haven't actually experienced all these variations?
I want to know your thoughts on anonymity. I can't say that word. Anonymity.
I can't say that word
Anonymousness. How does anonymity affect? How do you think that affects the three-face model?
The three-face model kind of falls apart really quickly. It was just kind of like a fun little thing to show you how like the persona, the mask, the original persona term kind of diverged into the three-mask thing. And now we're in a situation where it's like psychology just shows us that we really have just an infinite number of masks we can play. And the nature of being an anonymous in a lot of these things is really good because you play a better role when you kind of don't have an attachment to who you were before. And this is kind of, you can get into like the nature of acting like this. What an actor does when he tries to get on a stage and play a good role is he tries to forget who he was before. He's trying to be completely the person that he is. So when you're already anonymous in a social place where people just have no idea who you were before, it is so easy to switch into another role. And it plays probably one of the biggest parts in why the internet's been a phenomenon even before VR, is because of being anonymous gives you the opportunity to just fill a potentially infinite number of roles because you just have no ties. People don't know where you're from. All you've got is a screen name or an avatar, and that is already just a choice that you make potentially. And I mean, people can gather in like some kind of subtle information, like we were talking about Clem. There's probably some kind of subconscious reason why he chose that, and maybe if we were genius psychologists, we could figure that out. But generally speaking, there is nothing about that represents any of your personalities, any of the acts that you put on. You are never in any instance of your regular life are you a blue man with glowing wings, and it's fantastic. You don't know me. Even if it does come from somewhere very deep. I don't know. What we're kind of doing with this anonymous thing is we're getting rid of a lot of the solid personalities or masks that we put on in our everyday life, and we're giving an opportunity to let something much deeper inside of us kind of take a hold, and usually it comes from places. A lot of people just kind of model themselves after who they already are, like a better representation of who they are. I know Pinkie and I were talking about this. Pinkie, this is who he sees himself as already. Like his inner monologue, who he thinks himself as, that's who he thinks he is. That's not who he wants to be. That's not, like some kind of fantastic role he wants to play. That's who he feels like he is on the inside.
Down to the green shoes.
Crocs are just for comfort. But honestly, I'm crude. I'm uncouth. I have a greasy personality. I've grated on some of your nerves or what have you in the past. But this is like when I saw this avatar in Mixamo, I was going, that's me, because I tried Strong Bad and I tried Strong Mad, and I've played them as characters when I was using those. If anybody remembers me using those.
Wait, did you do like the voice back then?
I attempted to do Strong Bad.
Awesome.
It's time to do some emails. But it was really bad. Yeah. But, I was having fun with it. I was playing it as a character. But when I saw this avatar, I was like, that's me. And I downloaded it. And I, rigged it and got it all ready to go and put it in. And I'm going, all right, I feel comfortable in this skin now. That's why I use this avatar in its many different weird forms.
Are those green Crocs?
That's what they are.
Last, I could. How do you pronounce that?
Lazy P, last P.
Lazy P. That's so much easier. Okay, Lazy P. What's up?
I got into the internet through my brother because it was always gaming. I was very interested into it, and then I started using the internet for information. After that, I started using internet as a refuge, as an escape from life. It was all different for me. In real life, I would speak to people, and then I would use the internet to escape, depression or being sad. And I started seeing that my personality was being developed in real life, and then more in the internet. My personality was being divided. But then I started getting less friends in real life, but not due to the internet. That's who I am. I speak little about myself. I'm really shy. I don't speak. I don't tell people who I am, only when I trust them. And on the internet, I evolved in something different. My personality got more in-depth. It's a mixture of everything, and I only let out what I want to let out.
That's sort of interesting. I haven't thought about it in this way before, but there's this interesting phenomena now with the internet where like pre-internet, when you had to socialize with like real human beings, you're all stuck in the same social whatever the expectations are. Like there's certain rules you adapt to, and like there's social graces, and I'm going to try and be polite, and all these things that become expected. And so that helps form your personality ultimately. Even if you don't want to do it, it is pushing you in a direction. But if you have the freedom to, let's say, be anonymous or just create a different personality online, where you don't have to adhere to those same rules and that same structure, you could naturally grow perhaps in a direction that is more natural, or something that's like more inherently in you. And maybe it is a less polite person or a more shy person. And like it's sort of, you have sort of the freedom to actually grow, I guess, more atypical or more away from what society wants you to be in a way. Do you think that might be true?
Yeah, and I really like that you brought that up, because people seeing this as also as an escape mechanism, and not just some opportunity, like a playful opportunity, but some people see it as a way to get out of something, is really interesting, because that ties into something that I said earlier about how the personality that is originally kind of given to you is a social construct, down to like the language that's given to you, the way you understand the world through language. Language is a social construct. It's given to you. And so a lot of the things that people experience that are sad, or, things, and they're just getting like a really bad feeling out of the environment of life or whatever, it ultimately is accumulated into a personality. The dread of whatever's going on accumulates into who you are. And so even if things start to look up, you might not necessarily see it. Your outlook might just start to be negative. And that personality, that mask, will start to feel more like a filter instead of just a role to play, And at that point, it feels like something you want to get out of. You want to break through the glass. And the internet, it creates that opportunity because it's a way to kind of get away from the environment that evokes that personality out of you. It reminds you that you don't have to wear that mask to be that person who's sad all the time, because you can just be someone else altogether and get a new perspective on life. And that's important for a lot of people.
We think that the internet can be like somewhere we can escape, but sometimes that we get too much into it, that even friendships on the internet, even people we speak to, stuff can get serious. We can get sad even from the internet. And that, but in the internet is the thing that we still have that layer of protection. We're behind the screen, or behind whatever it is, a phone or virtual reality. We can always step back and rethink and calm ourselves down. And some people cannot do that. But that also goes into my personality, because stuff I learned on the internet, because I don't know, I was a community manager for many communities. My native language isn't English. I learned English through the internet entirely, and I was pretty much forced to, because when I wanted to be a community manager of a community, they were like, you need to know English to interact with people. I was like, okay, in 3 weeks I'll learn English. I'll start doing a better accent and stuff like that, and I did. Yeah, 3 weeks. I was good at writing on forum posts. I would rant about shit, but then I just was forced to do an accent. I never spoke because it was different to me. Speaking was a little different, so I got into it. I started speaking well. Anyways, I was like a community manager, and I had to deal with the different personalities. I was a Gary's mod community manager. There was like a lot of languages, a lot of cultures, and then people wanted to lie, but through their like movement that isn't even VR, like me, desktop, they would move as they lied, the way they looked around. I started to study that, and that started to reflect on real life too. I can see the tone of people when they were lying, the tone when they were doing something bad, if they were being honest, and I started reflecting on the internet and also in real life. And that was like an awesome feeling to have. But then stuff can be serious, and I started banking off, but some people don't do that. I saw people getting their lives ruined in the internet because they started revealing too much of their privacy. I've seen people be in the internet for like 2 years just to get someone's information on purpose, just to fuck with them, leak information or leak pictures. Yeah, leak pictures, nude pictures even, like private stuff,
It is interesting to consider that one of the worst things you can ever do to somebody on the internet is remind them of who they are in real life. People come to all kinds of crazy conclusions about oh, we're scared of the SWAT team coming to our door. But I know a lot of people who are just scared of people knowing what they look like in real life. Like one of the worst things you could ever do to somebody is make two worlds clash. it just throws you out of whack because then their internal personalities are forced to clash and kind of converge into one, and that's a really rough thing, especially if you get thrown into it.
The power that you used to have in the anonymity just suddenly, vanishes.
Yeah,
that's like
exactly.
tragic.
Yeah.
We're at an hour.
Remind me what
is there
that is
anyone
again.
okay? So I'm just curious about this. So like, you have an image in your mind, right? Like Melody, I have an image of her in my mind. And it's this avatar. It's not who she is in real life, right? And then if I met her in real life, I'm going to have a new image in my mind. And I'm sort of curious for people who have actually met up in real life, like at the meetups, and you met the human being behind the mask. Like, what image do you hold in your mind when you think of that person? Like, do you think of their avatar, or have you shifted over and now you think of the human that's wearing them?
You know, Mr. Q. I actually met him in real life. I was supposed to meet him at the train station where we go into the con together, and he just tapped me on the shoulder because he knew how I looked like, but I didn't know how he looked like. Just turned around and there he was.
Very moment, you had no idea what he looked like
because he wanted it to be a surprise, and I sort of wanted it too because it would be really funny.
Was it funny?
It was.
Wait, so now when you think of him and you picture him in your mind, are you picturing the avatar or the human?
I still see him as an anime girl.
Oh man,
because I've seen the anime girl more than I've seen him as a man.
I mean, it's like if you spend months hanging out with somebody in here and then you meet them in real life just for one day, like even though you're seeing the real human being, I don't know if that necessarily supplants the original, like the identity you've built up for them over time. Like I've met Goblox. I think he took off in real life. I had no idea what he looked like until I met him, and it was shocking. Like he's, it's not, after picturing Widowmaker for so long, it was surprising that he wasn't Widowmaker. He sort of spoiled it because, like, someone who's consistent, like Mr. Pinkie, you're consistently that guy, even when you switch up the costume. Now you have I have a strong image of you in my mind, right? And if you switched it up now, I would get pissed off. But a lot of people are like more flexible.
So I got to meet a lot of the VRchat crew, like Gunter, VR Pill, and all the other people at a conference, and it was very interesting. I sort of thought of it as like, oh, I'm getting to meet this person's quote unquote like real avatar as like their physical bodies that they don't really get to choose or whatever. And it's such a strange dynamic, and it's something I definitely want to like experience a lot more in terms of like seeing, what sort of carries over and what doesn't. And like, it's interesting seeing how this subculture sort of, moves into the real world, and how, for the most part, you've been spending so much time with these people that, you do feel somewhat comfortable in meeting them,
Okay, I'm only going to give us like 5 more minutes, so let's fucking race through these. Let's go, Heartless.
So like going on the topic of like virtual identity, like as myself, I identify as this creature in VR. All my friends online, you start to create like a mental image of them, not necessarily by the avatar, but you start to wonder how would they look real life just by judging on their voice. And then it's a real culture shock kind of a thing when you see like a picture of them, or you Skype them and they turn on the camera, like, oh, that's you. You look completely different to what I imagined.
I've definitely experienced that before, just listening to podcasts or whatever, and like you hear a voice for years and then you see them and it's shocking. And here it's even worse because you're hearing them and you're seeing some visual representation of them, even though it's not real, but like it gets in your brain. And yeah, it's very strange. I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to go deep into it, everything that you see from another person is always going to be a representation of that person. Because if you really want to identify who you really are with whatever's deep down in your mind, no one can see that. Like, you can't crawl into somebody else's brain to see who they really are. You will only ever see them in representations of themselves. And the body, how you maintain your body in real life, is a vague representation of who you are because most of it is given to you. But your avatar in here is a much better representation of who you are because you have a lot more control over that. It is more based off of more of the internal identity that you kind of internally have. And so when that representation changes to you, to the person, to the other person, it feels as if the person is changing themselves because the representation is all you had, of that person, So for someone who is already in touch with themselves because they know who they are deep down, a change in appearance or something else to try out something different, to try out some different way to represent themselves, doesn't seem like a big deal. But to everybody else who only had that representation of you to go off of, it's unearthing. You just unearth everything that you know about that person's representation of themselves, you know?
All right.
Yeah.
Wrap it up. Here we go.
We'll wrap it up.
We're moving. Let's go.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right, Ghoster had chimed in just at the beginning of this, and I think we were probably going off the same thing. Him and I actually met up and spent a couple of days together, and I want to play off of what he had said, how I have always kind of gone off voice and personality over visual appearance, just because generally online chat rooms and voice chat, you don't really get that visual representation. In every game, their avatar changes. So I was wondering if you...
Yeah, it was kind of weird meeting you for the first time. I didn't expect you to look like the way you did, and I'm pretty sure you didn't expect me to look like the way I did.
He actually looks like a Turian?
Oh, no, I expected you.
It was kind of difficult trying to associate you to this person I know online of a Turian. So at some point I just gave up and said, that guy is the Turian, instead of this is Cora, who is a Turian.
He's wearing a human skin temporarily.
Right.
And I was going to mention something like that as well, Nomono. I've been having Goose help me a little bit more, and I've been watching some of his streams, and I flip-flop sometimes between, how I see him. Sometimes as a big giant robot, and sometimes as his actual human self.
Oh, we were talking about him earlier because he has a YouTube channel, and like we're so used to the robot body that to then and he's not here, is he? Double Goose. He's put, he's
working on something right now.
He performs a lot. He'll put on a voice and he's playing a character, and so it's very off-putting for me to see a human being, right? Because like I'm seeing an animated character like that fits that personality really well. But he's a handsome guy. He seems cool.
One of my first interactions was Double Goose was watching the Squats live stream.
Oh, you got to see, and you see him in real life in that, right? Like he's
yeah. I was like, oh, because on his stream he's got like him actually doing the squats and everything. So I was like, that was one of the first images I had of him. So to me, it never really bothered. But again, that's because I first saw him that way.
All right, let's go ahead and do 30 dab squats. So we're gonna go ahead and dab while we squat. 1.
We, as you can see, we're doing squats in real life if you want to join us.
All right, and that is the first 10-minute mark, so let's all go ahead and take 2 minutes, and we'll be back in a little bit. Grab some water.
First 10-minute mark. Oh, yeah, it is 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
as we're closing down, any final thoughts from you guys?
As VR goes forward, and I really, in my very optimistic view, think that this is just going to continue to grow, whether it is here in VRchat or in the other places. People are going to keep creating new avatars, new personas, quote unquote, for what they're going to do. Like in my case, I really don't feel like it's a persona. It's just me being more me than I am when I'm at work, because that's the only other place I am. I'm pretty much like this, minus some of the swear words with my kid. So I think we're going to keep going and growing, and we're going to see some really crazy, weird stuff happen.
Ultimately, when it comes to the quest of finding who you are in this world, VR, it's a better opportunity. It's a bigger platform for that. It's a more integrated platform. And it offers a lot of different ways to experiment with who you are.
Are you waving, Melody, or do you have something to add really quick? Or are you just waving? Okay, bye. Here's my thought, man. We're talking about all these masks and all these things that we're wearing. We're going to subvert that with Neuralink. We're going to get some kind of brain-to-brain interface where none of my bullshit comes out, none of your bullshit comes out. Our brains are directly linked. It's going to be programmed into our headsets. And here, put your finger out, and we're just going to touch tips, boop, and then a little bit of our brain power gets swiped, and we have to experience being the other person. That's going to be really rad. That's coming. That's the next 100 years for sure, right?
That is a possibility. I feel like that will be a bad thing, though.
Oh, it's going to be great. Everyone's going to love it. Shut up. All right. Everybody, get up on stage. We're going to do a big group picture.
And wait, what was the word that nobody could say? Oh, the Double Goose is here. We were talking about you. Get up here.
So much crap about you. 3, 2, 1.